The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder that sent passengers stumbling into walls and each other. Kara Vance did not move. She sat perfectly still in her seat near the back of the cargo hold, her eyes fixed on the small viewport that showed the massive space station growing larger against the backdrop of a dying red star. This was Crucible Station, home to the most dangerous academy in the known galaxy. The Zenthari Combat Institute had stood for 3,000 years, training the deadliest warriors from 100 different species. No human had ever graduated. No human had ever survived past the first semester. Kira was 17 years old. She had short black hair that she cut herself with a combat knife. Her skin was pale from growing up on underground colony ships, and her eyes were a strange shade of gray that made other humans uncomfortable. She was small for her age, barely reaching 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed less than 120 pounds. By any measure of the galactic species represented at the Institute, she was weak, fragile, and completely unsuited for combat training. She was also the only human in 300 years to be accepted. The transport docked with a sound of grinding metal and hissing pressure seals. Around her, other new students began gathering their belongings. Kira counted 12 different species just in her immediate area. There were the massive Kroken, standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and thick scaled hide that could stop most projectile weapons. There were the Serpentine Veth, whose bodies were essentially one long muscle wrapped around a skeleton of flexible cartilage. There were Thornbacks with their natural bone armor, Mistwalkers who could phase partially out of normal space, and several species Kara did not recognize. All of them looked at her with varying degrees of curiosity, disgust, or hunger. She ignored them all. The airlock opened and the new students filed out onto the station. Kira found herself walking through a corridor made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. The walls were covered in marks, scratches, dents, and stains that she recognized immediately. These were the marks of combat. This corridor had seen thousands of fights over thousands of years. A Kroken male fell into step beside her. He was young for his species, probably around 40 years old, which made him roughly equivalent to her in terms of development. His scales were a deep blue color, and he had the characteristic brow ridges that marked him as from the warrior caste. "You are the human," he said. His voice was deep and resonant, produced by vocal organs that humans did not possess. "I am a human," Kira replied without looking at him. "You will die here. Probably within the first day. Possibly within the first hour. I have studied your species. You are weak. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears. You cannot regenerate. You cannot survive in vacuum. You cannot see in darkness. You cannot hear frequencies outside a tiny range. You are, in every measurable way, inferior to every species represented at this institute." Kara kept walking. "Thank you for the information." The Kroken made a sound that might have been confusion. "You do not argue? You do not defend your species? Why would I? Everything you said is true." Now the Kroken definitely sounded confused. "Then, why are you here? Why would you come to a place where you will certainly die?" Kara stopped walking. She turned to look at the Kroken directly. Her gray eyes met his golden ones without flinching. "Because I do not plan to die. And because everyone who thinks I will is going to make a mistake." "What mistake?" "Underestimating what a human can do when we stop trying to be fair." She walked away before he could respond. The orientation hall was a massive chamber carved directly into the asteroid that formed the core of Crucible Station. Hundreds of new students gathered on the floor while a raised platform held several figures that Kira assumed were instructors. The most prominent among them was a creature that defied easy classification. It had a humanoid torso attached to a lower body that resembled a spider with too many legs. Its face was a mass of sensory tentacles that constantly moved and twitched. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. "I am Instructor Prime Vexus. For those of you who survive the next year, I will be your primary combat instructor. For those of you who do not survive, I will be the last face you see." No one laughed. No one moved. The Zenthari Combat Institute does not train soldiers. It does not produce officers or tacticians. It creates weapons. Living weapons that can be deployed into any environment, against any enemy, under any circumstances. To become such a weapon, you must first break. Everything you believe about yourself, about your species, about combat itself must be destroyed and rebuilt. Many of you will not survive this process. That is acceptable. Those who cannot adapt have no place in the galaxy we are preparing you for. Vexus moved across the platform, its many legs clicking against the stone. You have all been selected for specific reasons. Some of you come from warrior species with long histories of combat. Some of you come from species that have developed unique biological advantages. Some of you come from species that have overcome impossible odds to survive in hostile environments. The tentacles on its face all pointed in one direction. Toward Kira. And one of you comes from a species that has no natural advantages whatsoever. A species that is fragile, short-lived, and, by all biological metrics, utterly unsuited for warfare. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at her. Kira felt the weight of hundreds of alien gazes pressing down on her. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She kept her eyes fixed on Vexus. The human was accepted because of a single recorded incident, Vexus continued. 3 years ago, a colony ship carrying 2,000 humans was attacked by Vrang raiders. The Vrang are a species that exists only to consume other sentient beings. They are born hungry and die hungry. They have conquered over 60 worlds and consumed approximately 80 billion sentient beings over their history. Silence filled the chamber. Even species that were naturally noisy became still. When the Vrang boarded the human colony ship, they expected an easy harvest. What they found was something else entirely. A single human child, 14 years old at the time, organized the surviving colonists into a resistance force. Over the course of 72 hours, this child led guerrilla attacks against the Vrang boarding parties. She used the ship's environmental systems as weapons. She created traps from scrap metal and cleaning chemicals. She turned air vents into kill zones and maintenance corridors into ambush points. Vexus paused. The tentacles writhed. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found 600 surviving humans. They also found the remains of over 400 Vrang warriors. The human child had killed 112 of them personally. She had done this despite having no weapons training, no combat experience, and no biological advantages whatsoever. She had done this by being willing to do what the Vrang never expected. She fought without rules. She showed no mercy. And she did not stop until every Vrang on that ship was dead. The chamber was absolutely silent now. That child is standing among you today. She has been accepted to the Institute not because humans are strong, but because this particular human has demonstrated something far more valuable than strength. She has demonstrated the one quality that separates survivors from corpses. Adaptability. Vexus turned away from Kara and addressed the full assembly once more. Orientation is concluded. You will each receive your dormitory assignments and class schedules. Combat training begins tomorrow at first light cycle. I suggest you rest while you can. Many of you will not survive your first lesson. The crowd began to disperse, but Kira noticed that a wide circle had formed around her. No one wanted to stand too close. Some of the students looked at her with new curiosity. Others looked at her with something that might have been fear. A few looked at her with hatred. She memorized those faces. She had learned long ago that the ones who hated you immediately were the ones who would attack first. Her dormitory assignment led her to a small chamber deep within the station. The room was barely large enough for a sleeping platform and a small storage compartment. There was no decoration, no comfort, nothing that suggested anyone was expected to enjoy their time here. The door had no lock. Privacy was apparently not a concept the Institute valued. Kira set her single bag on the sleeping platform and began to unpack. She had brought very little. A few changes of clothing. Basic hygiene supplies. A small tablet containing files she had been studying for the past 3 years. Files on every species that had ever attended the Institute. Files on their weaknesses, their habits, their combat styles. Files on the instructors, the curriculum, the station itself. She had been preparing for this moment since the day the rescue ships found her covered in Vrang blood. A shadow fell across her doorway. She did not look up. Human. The voice was female, or at least the translator implant in her ear rendered it that way. Kira finished arranging her belongings before turning around. The creature in her doorway was from a species she recognized immediately. Sethrani. They were bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, but covered in fine iridescent scales that could shift color to match their surroundings. Their eyes were solid black orbs that could see into spectrums humans could not perceive. Their hands ended in retractable claws that could cut through steel. Most importantly, Sethrani were one of the most successful species at the Institute. Over 60% of their students graduated, compared to the galactic average of 12%. Yes? Kira said. My name is Thessaly. I have been assigned as your dormitory neighbor. I wanted to introduce myself before someone kills you. That is very considerate. Thessaly stepped into the room. She was taller than Kira by nearly a foot, and her scales were currently a deep purple that seemed to shimmer with internal light. I have studied humans. Your species is fascinating to me. You have spread across more than 3,000 star systems in less than 500 years. You have done this despite being one of the physically weakest sentient species ever catalogued. How? Kira considered the question. It was one she had thought about many times. We are very good at not dying. Elaborate. Most species, when faced with impossible odds, accept their fate. They recognize when they are beaten. They surrender, or flee, or simply give up. Humans do not do this. We keep fighting even when there is no logical reason to continue. Even when every calculation says we should lose, we refuse to accept that calculation. And, sometimes, just often enough, we win anyway. Thessaly's scales shifted to a lighter shade of purple. This sounds like delusion rather than strategy. Sometimes the line between the two is very thin. The Vrang incident. You were 14 years old. 400 warriors from a species that has conquered dozens of worlds. You should have died. Yes. How did you survive? Kira was quiet for a moment. Then, she sat down on the sleeping platform and looked up at Thessaly. I decided that I would not die. That was the first decision. Everything else came from that. Once you truly decide that you will not die, once you remove that as a possibility, your mind starts working differently. You stop thinking about how to survive and start thinking about how to win. They are not the same thing. Explain. Surviving is reactive. You wait for threats and respond to them. Winning is proactive. You create the conditions for victory. On that ship, I stopped trying to hide from the Vrang. I started hunting them. I learned their patterns, their weaknesses, their habits. I found out that they were vulnerable to certain frequencies of sound that did not bother humans. I found out that they could not see well in the wavelengths of light produced by emergency systems. I found out that their exoskeletons, while strong, had gaps at the joints. And then, I used all of that information to kill them, one by one, until there were no more left to kill. Thessaly was silent for a long moment. Her scales had shifted to a color Kira had not seen before, something between silver and gold. You are not what I expected. What did you expect? I expected a frightened child pretending to be brave. Instead, I find something else. Something I do not have a word for in my language. My people have a word for it, Kira said. We call it spite. Spite? The desire to succeed specifically because others expect you to fail. The willingness to endure anything, sacrifice anything, just to prove that you cannot be beaten. It is not a noble emotion. It is not rational. But, it has kept my species alive through things that should have destroyed us. Thessaly made a sound that the translator could not interpret. Then, she stepped back toward the door. I think I will enjoy watching you, human. Either you will do something remarkable, or you will die in an interesting way. Both outcomes will be educational. She left. Kira returned to her unpacking. She had one more item in her bag, something she had not shown anyone. It was a small piece of metal, twisted and blackened by heat. A fragment of Rang-Chitin, taken from the first warrior she had killed on that colony ship. She kept it to remind herself of what she was capable of when she stopped holding back. She placed it on the small shelf beside her sleeping platform. Tomorrow, her real training would begin. Tomorrow, she would start showing this galaxy what humans could do when they stopped playing by the rules. The first light cycle alarm sounded 3 hours before Kira expected it. She had been warned that the Institute manipulated time cycles to keep students disoriented, but the reality was still jarring. She forced herself out of the sleeping platform, dressed quickly in the standard gray training uniform that had been delivered to her room during the night, and stepped out into the corridor. Other students were emerging from their rooms, many of them looking confused or angry about the early wake-up. Kira observed them carefully. The way someone handled unexpected disruption revealed a lot about their character. Some species immediately became aggressive, looking for something to attack. Others became withdrawn, retreating into themselves. A few simply adapted, accepting the change and moving forward. Kira fell into the third category. She had learned long ago that fighting against circumstances you could not control was a waste of energy. Better to save that energy for fights you could win. The training arena was a massive circular chamber located at the center of the station. The floor was made of some material that could shift and change, creating different terrain features on command. The walls were lined with weapon racks holding implements of destruction from 100 different species. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow. Instructor Vexus was waiting on a raised platform overlooking the arena. Its tentacles twitched as students filed in and took positions around the perimeter. Combat training at the Institute begins with a simple principle, Vexus announced. We do not teach you how to fight. You already know how to fight. Every sentient being knows how to fight from the moment they are born. What we teach you is how to win. And, the first lesson in winning is understanding that combat is not about strength, or speed, or skill. Combat is about will. The spider-like legs carried Vexus down from the platform onto the arena floor. Will is the determination to continue when your body tells you to stop. Will is the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seems certain. Will is the thing that separates the living from the dead in every battle ever fought. And, will cannot be taught. It can only be revealed. The floor of the arena began to shift, rising in some places and falling in others. Obstacles appeared. Trenches formed. The entire space transformed into a chaotic battlefield in a matter of seconds. Today's exercise is simple. Survive. The arena will attack you. Your fellow students may attack you. The only rule is that you cannot leave the arena until the exercise ends. The exercise ends when I decide it ends. A low hum filled the air. Kira recognized it immediately as the sound of automated weapons powering up. She did not wait to see where they were. She moved. The first shots came from hidden turrets in the walls. Energy bolts streaked across the arena, and students scattered in every direction. Some were hit immediately, their bodies convulsing as the stun energy overwhelmed their nervous systems. Others found cover and returned fire with weapons they had grabbed from the racks. Kira did not grab a weapon. She did not look for cover. She ran directly toward the nearest wall, where the turret was still firing. Most students would consider this suicidal. But Kira had noticed something in the pattern of fire. There was a half-second delay between shots, and the turret had a limited arc of movement. She timed her approach perfectly, sliding under a shot and reaching the wall just as the turret began to track toward her next position. She jumped, caught the edge of the turret housing, and pulled herself up. The mechanism tried to adjust, but she was inside its minimum range. She found the power cable and pulled. The turret went dead. From her elevated position, she could see the entire arena. Chaos reigned below. Students fought each other, fought the automated defenses, fought the changing terrain itself. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, stunned into unconsciousness. only about half the original group was still moving. Kara dropped down from the wall and moved. A Krogan charged at her from the left. She recognized him as the one who had spoken to her on the transport. He was bellowing some kind of battle cry, all four arms raised to strike. She did not try to fight him directly. She was not stupid. Instead, she dropped flat at the last moment, letting his momentum carry him over her. While he was off balance, she rolled to the side and swept her leg against the back of his knee. His leg buckled. Before he could recover, she was already moving away. Fighting was not the objective. Surviving was. A Sothrani appeared beside her, moving with that fluid grace that made their species such effective predators. It was not Thessaly, but another member of the species. Its claws were extended, and its scales had shifted to a red color that Kira assumed indicated aggressive intent. Human, it hissed. Easy prey. It lunged at her. Kara did not dodge. Instead, she stepped forward, inside the arc of its claws, and drove her elbow into the soft tissue under its jaw. The Sothrani made a choking sound. While it was stunned, Kira grabbed its arm and twisted, using its own momentum to throw it into the path of an incoming energy bolt. The Sothrani went down, stunned. Kara kept moving. The exercise continued for what felt like hours. The arena kept changing, creating new obstacles and new dangers. The automated weapons were joined by drones that swooped down from above. The floor itself became a hazard, sections of it suddenly heating or electrifying or simply falling away. Through it all, Kira survived. She did not fight unless she had to. She did not waste energy on victories that did not matter. She focused only on the objective that Vexus had given them. Survive. By the time Vexus called an end to the exercise, only 17 students remained standing. Kira was one of them. Her uniform was torn and scorched, her body was covered in bruises and minor cuts, but she was standing. More importantly, she had not used a single weapon. Vexus descended from the platform and walked among the survivors. Its tentacles examined each of them in turn, lingering longest on Kira. Interesting, it said. Most humans who have attended this institute believe that their only path to survival was to acquire weapons and use them as equalizers. You did not follow this pattern. Weapons are tools, Kara said. Useful in certain situations. But a tool you do not know how to use is worse than no tool at all. I do not know how to use the weapons on those racks. So I used the tools I do know how to use. And what tools are those? My environment. My enemy's expectations. My body. Vexus made a sound that might have been approval. You will report to advanced combat theory tomorrow. The rest of you, dismissed. As the survivors filed out of the arena, several of them gave Kira looks that contained something other than contempt. Some might have been grudging respect. Others might have been fear. She had taken the first step. She had shown them that the human was not going to be easy prey. Now she just had to survive long enough to show them everything else. That night, someone tried to kill her for the first time. She was in her dormitory, reviewing her files, when she heard the almost imperceptible sound of her door sliding open. She did not look up. She had been expecting this. If you are going to kill me, she said quietly, you should have done it without opening the door. A pause. Then, a voice she did not recognize. How did you know? The air pressure changed when the door opened. I felt it on my skin. That is impossible. Humans cannot sense such small changes. Most humans cannot. I trained myself to do it. It took 3 years. A figure stepped into the room. It was a species Kara did not immediately recognize. Bipedal, but with an extra joint in each leg. Covered in what looked like bark. 2 large eyes that reflected almost no light. Why? The creature asked. Why would you spend 3 years training to sense air pressure changes? Because I knew that someone would try to kill me in my sleep. And I knew that the only warning I would get would be the change in air pressure when they opened my door. The creature stood very still. You planned for this specific moment. I planned for many moments. This was one of them. You do not seem afraid. Kira finally looked up from her tablet. I have been afraid every moment of every day since I was 14 years old. But I have learned that fear is just information. It tells you that danger is present. What you do with that information is what matters. What will you do now? That depends on you. Are you here to kill me, or to test me? The creature was silent for a long moment. Then, it made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter, though it did not sound like any laughter Kira had ever heard. You are not what we expected, human. The others said you would be easy. They said you would be frightened and alone and vulnerable. They bet on how long you would last. Most said less than a week. And you? I said you would last longer. I wanted to see if I was right. Are you satisfied? I am intrigued. You planned for assassination attempts before you even arrived. You trained your body to sense changes that your species cannot naturally detect. You fought in the arena today without weapons and survived. These are not the actions of prey. These are the actions of a predator. Kira stood up slowly. She was still significantly shorter than the creature, but she did not feel small. I am whatever I need to be to survive. That is what humans are. We are not the strongest, or the fastest, or the toughest. We are the most adaptable. Put us anywhere, in any situation, against any enemy, and we will find a way to survive. And, sometimes, we will find a way to win. The creature studied her with those dark, reflective eyes. My name is Thornwood. I am from a species called the Verdani. We are one of the few species that has achieved a 100% graduation rate at this institute. I know. I studied your species. You are plant-based, but not in the way most people assume. Your bodies are actually colonies of millions of smaller organisms working together. You cannot be killed by conventional means because destroying part of your body just means the remaining parts redistribute the workload. You studied us. I studied everyone. Every species at this institute. Every instructor. Every graduate. I have been preparing for this for 3 years. Thornwood made that strange laughing sound again. And yet you are still the weakest being here. All your preparation, all your knowledge, and you are still fragile. One blow from a Kroken could shatter every bone in your body. One bite from a Veth could inject enough venom to stop your heart in seconds. One touch from a Mistwalker could phase you partially out of reality and leave you trapped between dimensions. Yes. This does not concern you? It terrifies me. But I will not let my terror stop me. I will use it. I will let it sharpen my awareness and fuel my determination. And, when one of those species tries to kill me, I will find a way to survive. Because that is what humans do. Thornwood stepped back toward the door. I came here to frighten you. To see how you would react. Instead, you have given me something else to think about. I believe you may actually survive this place, human. Not because you are strong, but because you refuse to accept that you are weak. There is no such thing as weak. There is only prepared and unprepared. Thornwood left. Kira returned to her studies. She had a lot more preparing to do. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and small victories. Combat training became more intense with each passing day. Students who had survived the initial culling began to drop out as injuries accumulated and spirits broke. The institute did not hold back. Broken bones were set and students were sent back to training before they had fully healed. Internal injuries were treated just enough to prevent death. Psychological pressure was applied constantly, through sleep deprivation, isolation, humiliation, and fear. Through it all, Kira endured. She learned to fight with weapons she had never seen before. She learned to kill with her bare hands. She learned combat styles developed by dozens of species over thousands of years. And she learned the one lesson that the Institute truly wanted to teach, that there were no rules in real combat. No honor. No fairness. Only survival. She also made enemies. A Krokan named Bracken had declared her his personal target after she humiliated him in the first training exercise. He had attacked her on 3 separate occasions, each time coming closer to actually killing her. She had survived through luck, planning, and a willingness to fight dirty that seemed to genuinely offend his warrior sensibilities. A group of Veth had formed a hunting pack that specifically targeted weaker students. Kara had become their favorite prey after she poisoned one of their members with a compound she had synthesized from cleaning supplies. The Veth had survived, but had been too sick to participate in training for nearly a week. Even some of the instructors seemed to take particular interest in making her life difficult. Instructor Vexus had assigned her the most dangerous partners for sparring exercises, the most challenging scenarios in tactical simulations, the most brutal punishment details when she inevitably failed to meet the Institute's impossible standards. But she also made allies, or at least something close to allies. Thessaly, the Sathrani who had introduced herself on the first day, had become a kind of observer. She did not help Kara, but she also did not hinder her. She watched. She asked questions. She seemed genuinely fascinated by the human way of approaching problems. Thornwood, the Verdani who had tested her that first night, occasionally shared information that proved useful. The locations of hidden caches. The schedules of patrols. The weaknesses of particular instructors. Nothing that could be traced back to assistance, but enough to give Kara an edge. And then, there was the most unexpected ally of all. His name was Rethkin, and he was a mistwalker. His species had the ability to shift partially out of phase with normal space, becoming intangible and invisible for short periods. They were considered one of the most dangerous species in the known galaxy, and one of the hardest to kill. He approached Kara one night in the mess hall, materializing in the seat across from her with no warning whatsoever. "You are interesting," he said without preamble. Kara did not react to his sudden appearance. She had been practicing staying calm in unexpected situations. That seems to be a common opinion. My species has a tradition. When we identify a being who displays unusual qualities, we mark them for observation. We watch them until we understand what makes them different. Then, we either kill them or bond with them, depending on what we learn. Which are you planning for me? I have not decided yet. But I wanted you to know that I am watching. I appreciate the honesty. Rethkin studied her with eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. You do not ask why I find you interesting. Most beings would ask. I assume it is for the same reason everyone else finds me interesting. I am a human who refuses to die when all logic says I should. That is part of it. But there is something else. Something I cannot quite identify. You have a quality that I have only seen in a few beings in my very long life. A kind of darkness that is not quite darkness. A willingness to do terrible things that does not come from cruelty or anger. Kira was silent for a moment. Then, she spoke quietly. On that colony ship, I did things that I cannot forget. I killed beings who were begging for mercy. I used children as bait to draw Vrang into ambushes. I tortured a captured raider for information and, then, killed him slowly because I knew his screams would frighten the others. I did all of this because it was necessary. Because it was the only way to save the people I was protecting. And, I would do it all again if I had to. This does not disturb you? It disturbs me every day. But, I have learned to live with disturbance. I have learned that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to become something that is not innocent at all. That is the darkness you see in me. The knowledge that I am capable of anything, and the acceptance of what that means. Rethkin was quiet for a long time. Then, he stood up and began to fade from view. I have decided, he said as he disappeared. I will not kill you. You are too valuable to waste. But, I will continue to watch. And, when the time comes, I will either help you or destroy you, depending on what you become. He vanished completely, leaving Kara alone with her thoughts. She had known from the beginning that this place would change her. That was, in fact, why she had come. The girl who had survived the Vrang attack was not the same girl who had boarded that colony ship. And the woman who would eventually leave this institute, if she survived, would not be the same person who had arrived. The only question was what she would become. And whether the galaxy would be ready for her when she did. 6 months had passed since Kara Vance first set foot on Crucible Station. In that time, she had been beaten unconscious 14 times, broken 11 bones, suffered internal bleeding on 3 occasions, and come within seconds of death more times than she could count. She had also earned something that no human had ever earned at the Zenthari Combat Institute: respect. It was not given freely. Nothing at the Institute was given freely. She had taken it, piece by piece, from every opponent she faced. Every time she got back up when she should have stayed down. Every time she found a way to win when victory seemed impossible. Every time she refused to accept the role that her biology had assigned her. The student body had changed their opinion of her gradually, almost reluctantly. The Krokan still looked down on her, literally and figuratively, but they no longer spoke of her as prey. The Sothrani treated her with the careful attention they reserved for potential threats. Even the Veth hunting pack had stopped targeting her specifically after she had killed one of their members in a sanctioned combat exercise. That death had been a turning point. The exercise had been simple: 2 students enter an arena, 1 student leaves. Lethal force was authorized. The Veth who drew Kara as his opponent had been overconfident. He assumed that his superior speed, strength, and venom would make the fight a formality. He had been wrong. Kara had studied the Veth for months. She knew their physiology better than most Veth knew it themselves. She knew that their venom glands were located in their lower jaw, and that a sufficiently hard impact to that area could cause those glands to rupture internally. She knew that their serpentine bodies, while incredibly strong, had a blind spot directly behind the skull where their spine connected to their brainstem. And she knew that Veth, despite their reputation as patient hunters, became impatient when their prey refused to run. She had refused to run. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. The Veth struck at her again and again, each time expecting the killing blow that would end the contest. Each time, Kara moved just enough to avoid death, taking injuries that would have been devastating to most species but that her human physiology could survive long enough for her to continue fighting. When the Veth finally overextended itself, lunging too far in frustration, she was ready. She drove her elbow into its lower jaw with every ounce of strength she possessed. The venom glands ruptured. Poison flooded the creature's own bloodstream. It convulsed, thrashed, and then went still. Kara had stood over its body, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and looked up at the observation gallery where instructors and students watched. She did not speak. She did not need to. From that day forward, no one at the Institute underestimated her. The advanced combat theory classes that Vexus had assigned her proved to be exactly what she needed. While other students focused on perfecting their natural abilities, Kara learned to exploit weaknesses that most species did not even know they had. She learned pressure points, nerve clusters, structural vulnerabilities. She learned which species could regenerate from what kinds of damage and which could not. She learned the psychological patterns that made certain species predictable and the cultural blind spots that made others vulnerable. Most importantly, she learned that combat was not about physical superiority. It never had been. Combat was about information, preparation, and the willingness to do what your opponent did not expect. Instructor Vexus took particular interest in her progress. "You are learning faster than any human who has attended this institute," it said one evening after a particularly brutal training session. "And yet you still insist on treating your weakness as an asset." Kara wiped blood from her face. A sparring session with a thornback had left her with a deep cut across her forehead, and head wounds bled profusely in humans. "My weakness is an asset. Every opponent I face underestimates me. They assume that my small size, my fragile bones, my lack of natural weapons means I cannot hurt them. By the time they realize their mistake, the fight is usually over. This strategy has limits. Eventually you will face an opponent who does not underestimate you. What then? Then, I will find another advantage. That is what humans do. We adapt. We improvise. We find ways to win that no one has ever thought of before." Vexus made a sound that might have been amusement. You speak of your species as if they are all like you. They are not. Most humans are soft, comfortable. They have lost the edge that allowed your ancestors to survive on a hostile planet. You are a throwback to an earlier time. Perhaps. Or perhaps all humans have this inside them. Perhaps it just takes the right circumstances to bring it out. What circumstances brought it out in you? Kara was quiet for a moment. I watched my parents die. The Vreng tore them apart in front of me. They made me watch because they thought it would break my spirit. Instead, it broke something else. It broke the part of me that believed in mercy. The part of me that believed there were limits to what I was willing to do. And, in breaking, you became something else. I became what I needed to be. Nothing more. Nothing less. Vexus studied her with those constantly moving tentacles. There is a tradition at this institute. Students who show exceptional promise are given the opportunity to participate in advanced challenges. These challenges are designed to push even the most capable students to their absolute limits. Many do not survive. Those who do often emerge permanently changed. Are you offering me this opportunity? I am telling you it exists. Whether you choose to pursue it is entirely your decision. But, I believe you should know that the next challenge is scheduled to begin in 3 days. It is called the Crucible Trial. Appropriate, given where we are. Students who complete it are given access to resources and training that others cannot obtain. They are also marked for recruitment by the most powerful military organizations in the galaxy. Kira considered this. What does the trial involve? I cannot tell you specifics. But, I can tell you that it requires a team. 5 students, working together. And, I can tell you that no human has ever been part of a team that completed the trial. How many humans have attempted it? 7. 3 died during the trial. 4 withdrew when they realized they could not complete it. None came close to success. And, you think I could be different? I think you have already proven yourself different. The question is whether you can prove it again when the stakes are higher than anything you have faced before. Kira nodded slowly. I will need to find a team. You already have one. Whether you know it or not. Before Kira could ask what that meant, Vexus turned and walked away, its spider-like legs clicking against the floor with a sound that seemed almost like laughter. The next morning, Kira found Thessaly waiting outside her dormitory room. The Crucible Trial, the Sathrani said without greeting. You are going to attempt it. How did you know? Instructor Vexus spoke with several students last night. Those of us who have been watching you could guess what that conversation was about. Thessaly's scales shifted to a deep blue color. I want to be part of your team. Kira studied her carefully. Why? Because you are going to succeed. I have watched you for 6 months. I have studied your methods, your strategies, your psychology. You do not fail. Even when every logical calculation says you should fail, you find a way to succeed. I want to be associated with that success. That is very pragmatic. Sathrani are pragmatic. We have survived as a species by making practical decisions rather than emotional ones. Joining your team for the Crucible Trial is a practical decision. Kira nodded. I would be fortunate to have you. Who else has expressed interest? Thornwood. The Verdani who visited you that first night. He has been providing you with information throughout your time here. He believes you are worth investing in. That makes 2. 3, actually. Rethkin the Mistwalker approached me this morning. He said something about watching you until he decided whether to kill you or bond with you. Apparently he has decided on the latter. Kara felt a chill run down her spine. Having a Mistwalker on her team would be an enormous advantage. They could phase through solid objects, become invisible, and strike from angles that most species could not defend against. But, trusting a Mistwalker was dangerous. Their species had a complicated relationship with concepts like loyalty and betrayal. That is 3. We need 5. The 5th has already volunteered. Though I suspect you will find his involvement more problematic than the others. Before Kira could ask who she meant, a massive shadow fell across the corridor. She looked up to find Bracken the Kroken standing behind Thessaly, his forearms crossed over his broad chest. "Human," he said. "Kroken." They stared at each other for a long moment. Bracken had tried to kill her at least 3 times since her arrival. She had embarrassed him, evaded him, and proven herself superior to him in ways that his warrior culture could not easily accept. "I wish to join your team for the Crucible trial," he said finally. "Why?" "Because I cannot defeat you. I have tried. Many times. Each time you find some way to escape or turn my strength against me. This has caused me to think about our encounters differently. At first I believed you were simply lucky. Then, I believed you were using dishonorable tactics. Now I believe something else." "What do you believe now?" "I believe you are the most dangerous person at this institute. Not because you are strong, but because you think in ways that we do not. You see opportunities where we see only obstacles. You find weapons where we see only environment. If I am to become the warrior I want to be, I need to learn to think like you do. I cannot do that as your enemy. Only as your ally." Kira considered his words carefully. Having a Kroken on the team would provide the raw physical power that she lacked. But Bracken had been her enemy for months. Could she trust him to watch her back when they were in danger? "If you betray me during the trial, I will kill you," she said quietly. Bracken bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. "If I betray you during the trial, I will deserve to die. A Kroken who breaks an oath of alliance forfeits their honor. I would rather die than live without honor. Then, we have an agreement." She extended her hand. Bracken looked at it with something like confusion. The gesture was not familiar to his species. "Among my people, this is how we seal agreements," she explained. He reached out with one of his lower arms and carefully took her hand in his. His grip was gentle, almost delicate, as if he was afraid of crushing her bones. Which he probably was. "The team is complete," Thessaly said. "Now we need to prepare." Preparation took the next 2 days. The team met in a training room that Thornwood had secured through means Kira did not ask about. They shared information, assessed capabilities, and tried to predict what challenges they might face. The Crucible trial was legendary among Institute students, but details were closely guarded. Those who completed it rarely spoke of the experience, and those who failed were often dead or too traumatized to discuss what they had been through. What little information existed suggested that the trial tested not just combat abilities, but psychological resilience, team coordination, and adaptability. Kira had dealt with all of those things before. Just not all at once. "The key is trust," she said on the night before the trial began. "We all come from different species with different cultures and different instincts. Those differences could be weaknesses, or they could be strengths. It depends on how we use them. Humans place great emphasis on trust," Rethkin observed. He had materialized in the corner of the room and had been listening without contributing for the past hour. "My species does not share this value. We form temporary alliances based on mutual benefit, not emotional connection." "I am not asking for emotional connection. I am asking for reliability. When I say I will do something, I do it. When I say I will protect someone, I protect them. Can you say the same?" Rethkin's form flickered, becoming partially transparent. "I can say that I have decided you are worth protecting. The reasons for that decision are my own. But, the decision itself is final. That is enough." Thornwood rustled, the thousands of tiny organisms that made up his body shifting against each other. "The Verdani do not typically form bonds with individual beings. We see ourselves as part of a greater whole. But, I have come to understand that you, Kira Vance, represent something important to that greater whole. Humans are spreading across the galaxy at a rate that concerns many species. Understanding how you think, how you adapt, how you survive when you should not, is valuable information. I will protect you because protecting you serves my species' interests. Also acceptable." Bracken slammed one of his fists against his palm. I have sworn an oath of alliance. That oath is binding until one of us dies or releases the other. My honor depends on upholding it. I will not fail. Thessaly's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a warm gold. I have already explained my reasons. They are pragmatic, but no less valid for that. I want to succeed, and I believe being part of this team gives me the best chance of success. I will not undermine that chance through betrayal. Kara looked at each of her teammates in turn. A Sithrani predator. A Verdani collective. A Mistwalker assassin. A Krokan warrior. And one small, fragile human who had somehow brought them all together. Tomorrow we begin the trial, she said. I do not know what we will face. But I know that together, we are stronger than any of us are alone. Whatever happens, remember that. We are a team. And teams protect each other. The Crucible trial began at midnight. They were transported to a different section of the station, one that Kara had never seen before. The corridors here were older, more worn, and covered in marks that spoke of violence far more extreme than anything in the training areas. The air smelled different too. Older. More dangerous. Instructor Vexus met them at the entrance to what appeared to be a massive airlock. Beyond this door is the Crucible, it said. The trial takes place in a section of the station that has been sealed off for over 1,000 years. What you will find inside has been designed to test every aspect of your abilities. Physical. Mental. Emotional. Strategic. You will face challenges that will push you to the absolute limits of what you are capable of. Some of these challenges will seem impossible. They are not. Every challenge in the Crucible has been completed by at least one team in the Institute's history. Whether you become another successful team or another set of corpses depends entirely on you. What are the rules? Bracken asked. There is only one rule. Reach the center of the Crucible. Everything else is permitted. The airlock began to open. Beyond it was darkness so complete that it seemed to swallow the light from the corridor behind them. The trial begins now, Vexus said. Survive. The team stepped through the airlock, and the door sealed behind them with a sound like a death sentence. For a moment, they stood in absolute darkness. Then, Kara's eyes began to adjust, and she realized that the darkness was not quite complete. There was a faint glow coming from somewhere ahead, just enough light to make out the rough outlines of their surroundings. They were in a corridor made of some organic material that seemed to pulse slightly, like the inside of a living creature. The walls were not flat but curved, covered in ridges and protrusions that looked disturbingly like bones. I do not like this place, Bracken said, his voice unusually quiet. No one does, Rethkin replied. He had become mostly transparent, only the faint shimmer of his outline visible against the organic walls. That is the point. Thessaly moved forward carefully, her scales shifting to match the color and texture of the walls. The trial tests psychological resilience. This environment is designed to trigger deep-seated fears. Many species have instinctive negative reactions to enclosed spaces that resemble internal anatomy. Then, we do not let it affect us, Kara said. Fear is just information. It tells us that we are in danger. We already knew that. She took the lead, moving down the corridor with careful, measured steps. The team fell into formation behind her, Thessaly and Thornwood flanking her, Bracken bringing up the rear, and Rethkin phasing in and out of visibility as he scouted ahead. The first challenge came without warning. The floor beneath them suddenly became liquid, a churning mass of something that looked like black oil but smelled like rotting flesh. Kara felt herself sinking, the substance closing around her legs with a grip that seemed almost intelligent. Do not struggle, Thornwood said quickly. Movement makes it grip tighter. This is a drowning pool. It responds to fear and panic. Kara forced herself to go still. The others did the same. The substance continued to pull at them, but more slowly now. How do we escape? Thessaly asked, her voice strained as she fought to remain calm. We do not escape. We go through. Kara took a deep breath and deliberately let herself sink deeper. The substance rose around her waist, her chest, her shoulders. She could feel it pressing against her, trying to force its way into her mouth and nose. She kept her lips sealed and continued to descend. The others followed her lead, though Bracken made a sound that might have been a growl of protest. The substance closed over Kira's head. She was completely submerged now, surrounded by darkness and pressure and the overwhelming smell of decay. She could not breathe. Could not see. Could not hear anything except the pounding of her own heart. She kept sinking. After what felt like an eternity, her feet touched something solid. She pushed down, and suddenly, she was rising again, emerging from the surface of the pool on the other side. She gasped for air and pulled herself onto solid ground, then turned to help the others as they emerged one by one. Bracken came up last, his massive body covered in the black substance that was already beginning to evaporate. He looked at Kara with an expression she had not seen from him before. "How did you know that would work?" "I did not know. But, I guessed." The substance responded to fear and struggle. So the solution was probably the opposite. Calm acceptance. Moving with it instead of against it. That is insane. Perhaps. But we are on the other side, and we are alive. The team continued through the crucible. Challenge after challenge tested them in different ways. There were physical obstacles that required strength and coordination. There were puzzles that demanded logical thinking under pressure. There were traps that could only be avoided through careful observation and quick reflexes. And there were enemies. The creatures that lived in the crucible were unlike anything Kara had ever seen. Some were clearly artificial, constructs designed by the Institute to test students. Others seemed genuinely alive, species that had been trapped in this section of the station for centuries and had evolved to survive in its hostile environment. The team fought together, each member contributing their unique abilities. Bracken's strength broke through barriers that the others could not penetrate. Thessaly's camouflage allowed her to scout ahead without being detected. Thornwood's distributed biology meant that injuries that would have killed other species barely slowed him down. Rethkin's phasing abilities let him strike from angles that enemies could not defend against. And Kira tied them all together, coordinating their efforts and finding solutions to problems that none of them could solve alone. They lost track of time as they pushed deeper into the crucible. Hours passed. Perhaps days. The team took turns resting while others kept watch. They shared their supplies, tended each other's wounds, and slowly began to understand each other in ways that went beyond simple alliance. Kira learned that Bracken had been the youngest of 12 siblings, the smallest and weakest until a growth surge in his 20th year made him larger than all of them. His obsession with strength came from those early years of being treated as inferior. She learned that Thessaly had been raised in a Sothrani creche where competition for resources was so intense that only 1 in 10 hatchlings survived to adulthood. Her pragmatism was not a choice but a survival mechanism burned into her earliest memories. She learned that Thornwood was actually very young by Verdani standards, only 4 centuries old, which made him practically an adolescent. His curiosity about other species was considered unusual among his people, who typically preferred to observe from a distance. And she learned that Rethkin had once been part of a bonded pair, a rare and sacred relationship among mistwalkers that meant 2 individuals chose to share their existence rather than maintain their traditional solitude. His partner had been killed during a mission gone wrong. The loss had nearly destroyed him. His interest in Kara came partly from recognizing in her a similar experience of loss transformed into purpose. They did not become friends. The concept meant different things to different species, and some of them did not have a concept for it at all. But they became something else. Something that might have been more important. They became a team. The final challenge appeared before them without warning. They emerged from a narrow tunnel into a vast chamber that seemed to stretch upward forever. In the center of the chamber was a platform, and on that platform was a door marked with symbols that Kira recognized from her studies. That door led to the center of the crucible. The end of the trial. But between them and the platform was a creature that made everything they had faced before seem trivial. It was massive, easily the size of a small building, with a body that seemed to be made of constantly shifting metal and organic tissue. Dozens of limbs extended from its central mass, some ending in claws, others in blades, others in appendages that Kara could not identify. It had no visible eyes, but she had no doubt that it could see them. That, Bracken said quietly, is the Guardian. I have heard stories. It is the final test of the Crucible trial. No team passes without defeating it or getting past it. How many teams have defeated it? None. The successful teams found ways to get past it. Kara studied the creature, her mind racing. It was too big to fight directly. Too powerful to overpower. Too well positioned to circumvent easily. We need a distraction, she said. Something to draw its attention while the rest of us reach the platform. I will be the distraction, Bracken said immediately. No. You are too valuable. We need your strength to help the others if something goes wrong. She looked at Rethkin. Can you phase through it? I could try. But creatures like this often have defenses against phasing. I might become stuck inside it. Then, we need another approach. She looked at the chamber again, really looked at it this time. The walls were covered in the same organic material as the rest of the crucible, but there were patterns in it. Lines and ridges that seemed almost deliberate. Thornwood. Can your organism separate from your main body? To a limited degree. Why? Because I think I know how to beat this thing. But I need to get close to it, and I need you to help me. She explained her plan quickly. It was insane. It relied on assumptions that might be completely wrong. It required her to put herself in more danger than she had ever faced before. The team listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was silence. You are going to die, Thessaly said flatly. Perhaps. But, if I do, the rest of you need to use the opportunity to reach the platform. Complete the trial. Do not waste my death. Humans, Bracken said, shaking his head. You are all insane. Probably. Are you going to help me anyway? The Kroken bared his teeth in that frightening smile. Of course. I swore an oath. Kara nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped into the chamber. The Guardian reacted immediately, its many limbs orienting toward her. She could feel its attention like a physical weight, pressing down on her from all directions. She started walking toward it. The creature did not attack immediately. It watched her, seemed to study her, as if trying to understand what this tiny, fragile being thought it was doing. Kara kept walking. When she was about 20 meters from the Guardian, Thornwood began to move. Small pieces of his body separated from the main mass, tiny organisms that scattered across the chamber floor and began climbing the walls. They were nearly invisible, just specks of living material moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated. The Guardian noticed them. Its attention split between Kara and the dispersing organisms. It seemed confused by the multiple targets, unable to determine which represented the greater threat. Kara reached the base of the Guardian and looked up at its massive bulk. The creature's body was indeed made of shifting metal and organic tissue, but she could see now that the two were not perfectly integrated. There were gaps. Seams. Places where the metal and flesh did not quite connect. Those gaps were her target. She started climbing. The Guardian finally reacted, its limbs sweeping toward her with speed that seemed impossible for something so large. She ducked under one, jumped over another, and kept climbing. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of combat as the rest of her team engaged the creature, trying to keep it distracted. One limb caught her across the back, sending her flying. She slammed into the Guardian's body, felt something crack in her ribs, and grabbed hold of a ridge before she could fall. The pain was enormous, but she had experienced worse. She kept climbing. The gaps she was looking for were near the top of the creature's body, where some kind of central processing node was located. If her guess was right, damaging that node would not kill the Guardian, but it would disable it long enough for the team to reach the platform. If her guess was wrong, she would die inside this thing and her team would have to find another way. She reached the gap and did not hesitate. She pulled herself through, feeling the metal and flesh press against her from all sides. Inside the Guardian was a nightmare of machinery and organic tissue, all of it pulsing and moving and very much alive. She found the node. It was exactly where she had expected it to be, exactly the type of structure she had studied in her advanced combat theory classes. Biological systems had common patterns, regardless of the species. Find the pattern, and you find the weakness. She had no weapons. She had her hands and her desperation and the piece of Rang chitin she had carried with her since she was 14 years old. The chitin was sharp. Sharp enough. She drove it into the node with all her strength. The Guardian screamed. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a combination of mechanical shrieking and organic howling that made Kira's ears ring. The creature's body convulsed, its limbs thrashing wildly. Kira was thrown clear, ejected from the gap like the Guardian was trying to expel a splinter. She hit the floor hard, felt more bones break, and lay still. But she could see her team running past the disabled Guardian. She could see them reaching the platform. She could see Bracken turn back, hesitate, then run toward her. "Do not stop," she tried to say, but the words would not come out. Bracken did not listen. He grabbed her broken body with hands that were surprisingly gentle and carried her to the platform. The others were already there, Thessaly punching the controls to open the door, Thornwood reassembling himself from the scattered organisms, Rethkin materializing with an expression that might have been concern. The door opened. They stumbled through together, the Guardian's screams still echoing behind them, and found themselves in a chamber that was nothing like the rest of the Crucible. It was clean, bright, peaceful. And, standing in its center was Instructor Vexus. "Congratulations," it said. "You have completed the Crucible trial." Kira tried to respond, but darkness was closing in around her vision. She had lost too much blood. Broken too many bones. Pushed her body past what even human stubbornness could sustain. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Bracken's voice, rough with something that might have been emotion. "If she dies after all that, I will tear this station apart." Then, everything went black. Kira woke up in the medical bay, which surprised her because she had not expected to wake up at all. The ceiling above her was white and featureless, illuminated by soft light that did not hurt her eyes. She could feel the familiar weight of bandages wrapped around her torso, and the dull ache of bones that were still healing told her that she had been unconscious for at least a few days. "You are awake." She turned her head, which took more effort than it should have, and found Thessaly sitting in a chair beside her bed. The Sithrani scales were a calm blue color, which Kira had learned meant she was relaxed but alert. "How long?" Kira asked. Her voice came out as a croak. 11 days. "Your injuries were severe. The medical staff was not certain you would survive. They said that any species with a less stubborn survival instinct would have died during the trial itself. Stubbornness is a human specialty. I have noticed." Thessaly's scales shifted to a warmer shade. "The others have been taking turns watching over you. Bracken was here until an hour ago. He has been very concerned, though he would never admit it." "The trial. Did everyone?" "Everyone survived. We all completed the Crucible trial. We are now officially Crucible survivors, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails." Kira let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. They had done it. Against all odds, against centuries of human failure, she had led a team to success. How are the others processing it? Thornwood has been unusually quiet. I believe the experience affected him more than he expected. He lost almost 30% of his organisms during the final battle with the Guardian. For a Verdani, that is significant. It will take him years to fully regenerate. He saved my life with that distraction. He knows. I believe that is what has affected him. The Verdani typically avoid forming attachments that might require sacrifice. He did not expect to care whether you lived or died. Kira thought about that. She had not expected anyone to care either. She had come to the Institute prepared to succeed or die alone. Instead, she had found something else entirely. And Rethkin? The Mistwalker has been strange even by his species standards. He spends hours sitting in the corner of this room, partially phased out of reality, just watching you. When the medical staff tries to remove him, he threatens to phase them into walls. They have learned to leave him alone. As if summoned by his name, Rethkin materialized near the foot of her bed. His form was more solid than usual, which Kara had learned meant he was making an effort to be present. "You almost died," he said without preamble. "I know. It disturbed me. I did not expect it to disturb me. I have watched many beings die. I have killed many beings. Death has never disturbed me before." "What disturbed you?" "The wrongness of it. You were not supposed to die in that place. You have more to do. More to become. Your story is not finished." He paused, and his form flickered slightly. "I believe this is what my species calls bonding. The recognition that another being's existence has become intertwined with your own. I have not experienced it since my partner died. I did not expect to experience it again." Kara met his eyes, or the places where his eyes would be if he was fully material. "I did not ask for this." "No. But that is what makes it valuable. Bonds that are chosen freely, without obligation or expectation, are the strongest bonds of all." He began to fade from visibility. "Rest now. You will need your strength for what comes next." He disappeared completely. Kara looked at Thessaly. "What comes next?" "Graduation. And, then, the offers." The offers began arriving before Kara was fully recovered. Messages poured in from military organizations across the galaxy. The Stellar Confederation wanted her for their Special Operations Division. The Krokan warrior clans wanted her as a tactical advisor. The Sithrani Intelligence Service wanted her for covert operations. Even the Veth Hunting Consortium sent a representative, offering her a position that would have been unprecedented for any non-Veth. She refused them all. "You are being foolish," Instructor Vexus told her during one of its visits. "These offers represent the most prestigious positions in galactic warfare. Any student would be honored to receive even one of them. You have received dozens. I am not interested in being a weapon for hire." "Then, why did you come to the Institute?" "That is what we train you to be." Kara sat up in her bed, ignoring the protest of her still healing ribs. "I came here to become something that could protect my people. Not to fight other species' wars, but to be ready when humans need someone who can fight the wars that matter." "And what wars are those?" "The ones that will come. The galaxy is full of species that see humans as weak, as prey, as resources to be exploited. The Vrang who attacked my colony ship were not unique. There are others who look at our expansion and see opportunity. Our colonies are vulnerable. Our military is spread thin. Eventually, someone is going to decide that humans are worth conquering." Vexus was quiet for a long moment. "You believe this will happen. I know it will happen. The only question is when, and whether we will be ready. And you intend to help make your species ready." "I intend to do whatever is necessary to ensure that when that day comes, humanity does not stand alone and unprepared." Vexus made a sound that might have been approval. "There is a position that might interest you. It is not like the others. It is not with any existing military organization. It is something new. Tell me." The proposal was called the Coalition Initiative. It was a project sponsored by a collection of species who had recognized the same pattern that Kara had. The galaxy was becoming more dangerous. Traditional military alliances were proving inadequate against new threats. Something different was needed. The initiative would create small, elite teams composed of members from different species. Each team would be designed to handle the kinds of threats that no single species could face alone. The teams would operate independently, answering to a council rather than any individual government. They would be deployed against enemies that threatened the stability of galactic civilization itself. And they wanted Kara to lead one of these teams. She accepted on one condition: her team from the Crucible trial would come with her. The condition was granted. Graduation day arrived 3 weeks after Kara had woken up in the medical bay. The ceremony was held in the same massive chamber where orientation had taken place, but the mood was completely different. Where new students had gathered nervously at the beginning of the year, now a much smaller group of survivors stood with the quiet confidence of warriors who had proven themselves. Kara stood among them, her injuries healed though the scars remained. She had earned many scars during her time at the institute. She wore them proudly. Instructor Vexus addressed the graduates from the raised platform. You came to this place as students. You leave as weapons. But remember that a weapon is only as good as the hand that wields it. Choose carefully who you serve. Choose carefully what causes you fight for. The Institute has given you the ability to kill. What you do with that ability is entirely your responsibility. The ceremony was brief. Certificates were distributed. Words of congratulation were offered. And then, it was over, and the graduates began to disperse to whatever fates awaited them. Kira's team gathered in a quiet corner of the station. Bracken had grown during their time together, though not physically. The anger and aggression that had defined him when Kira first arrived had been tempered into something more controlled, more purposeful. He still valued strength above all else, but he had learned that strength came in many forms. I never thought I would follow a human, he said. My ancestors would consider it shameful. They believed that smaller species existed only to be dominated. And, now I believe that my ancestors were fools. Size is not strength. Power is not dominance. The truly strong are those who can see beyond their limitations and become something greater. You showed me that, human. Kira. I will follow you until one of us dies. Thessaly's scales had shifted to a color Kara had never seen before, a deep amber that seemed to glow with internal light. My species values pragmatism above emotion, she said. We form alliances based on advantage, not sentiment. This is how we have survived for millennia. Are you saying you regret joining my team? I am saying that I have discovered something unexpected. The pragmatic choice and the emotional choice are sometimes the same. Joining your team gave me advantages, yes. But it also gave me something I did not expect. Connection. Purpose. A sense of belonging that I have never experienced before. She paused. I do not know if my species has a word for this feeling. But I know that I do not want to lose it. I will stay with you for as long as you will have me. Thornwood rustled, his body moving in ways that suggested deep thought. The Verdani live for thousands of years. We have learned patience that other species cannot comprehend. We observe. We study. We rarely act, because action has consequences that echo across centuries. But sometimes action is necessary, Kara said. Yes. Sometimes it is. And, when it is, we must choose our actions carefully. I have chosen to act alongside you, Kira Vance. Not because I expect immediate benefits, but because I believe you represent something important. A new kind of thinking. A new approach to the challenges that face all sentient beings. I want to be part of that. I want to learn from it. And, perhaps, in some small way, I want to help shape it. Rethkin materialized last, his form more solid and stable than Kara had ever seen it. My species does not form bonds easily. We are solitary by nature, existing partially between realities, never fully present in any single moment. This makes connection difficult. Most mistwalkers live and die without ever truly knowing another being. But, you have known someone. I knew my partner. For centuries, we shared existence in a way that I cannot explain to those who have not experienced it. When she died, I believed I would never know anyone again. I believed that part of me had died with her. And, now I have found something I did not expect. Not the same bond one shared with her. That was unique and can never be replaced. But, something else. Something new. You, Kira, and this team we have formed. You have given me a reason to remain fully present in reality. A reason to continue existing rather than fading entirely into the spaces between. His form flickered, then steadied. I do not know if what I feel is loyalty, or friendship, or something else entirely. But I know that I will not leave. Whatever path you walk, I will walk beside you. The team stood together in silence for a moment, these 5 beings from 5 different species who had somehow become something more than allies. Kira felt the weight of their trust, their expectations, their belief in her. It was heavier than any burden she had ever carried. But it was also warmer. More meaningful. The Coalition Initiative wants us to start training immediately, she said finally. There are reports of unusual activity on the Outer Rim. Species that should not be cooperating are forming alliances. Resources are being gathered. Something is building, and the Council wants us ready to respond. Any idea what we will be facing? Thessaly asked. Not yet. But I have some theories. And none of them are good. The team boarded their transport and left Crucible Station behind. Kira watched through the viewport as the massive structure grew smaller against the backdrop of the dying red star. She had arrived here as a girl with nothing but spite and stubbornness. She was leaving as something else entirely. A leader. A warrior. A symbol of what humans could become when they stopped accepting the limitations others tried to impose on them. Her first mission briefing came through 3 days into their journey. The reports from the Outer Rim were worse than the initial intelligence had suggested. A coalition of predator species, including the Vrang, had formed an alliance unprecedented in galactic history. They called themselves the Hunger Collective, and their stated goal was simple: to identify and consume every species they considered prey. Humanity was at the top of their list. The collective had already attacked several outlying human colonies. The casualty reports were horrific. Entire populations wiped out. Children taken for purposes that the intelligence analysts could not bring themselves to detail. The attacks were not random. They were coordinated. Planned. The collective was testing humanity's defenses, probing for weaknesses, preparing for a larger assault. The Coalition Council wanted Kira's team to respond. This is what you came to the Institute for, Bracken said when she shared the briefing with the team. A chance to fight the enemies of your people. Yes. But I did not expect the opportunity to come so soon. Or on such a scale. Does that change anything? Kira thought about the question. She remembered the colony ship. The screams. The blood. The 14-year-old girl who had watched her parents die and decided that she would never be helpless again. No, she said. It does not change anything. I have been preparing for this my entire life. The only difference is that now I am not alone. The first engagement came 2 weeks later. The collective had targeted a small human agricultural colony on a planet called Haven's Rest. It was a perfect target, isolated, poorly defended, with a population of almost 50,000 civilians who had no military training and limited access to weapons. Kira's team arrived 48 hours before the collective attack force was projected to reach the system. It was not enough time. Not nearly enough time. But it was what they had. The colony's leadership was terrified. They had seen the reports from other attacked worlds. They knew what was coming. Several of them suggested evacuation, but the math made that impossible. They did not have enough ships to move 50,000 people in 48 hours, and any attempt to flee would just scatter the population across the space lanes where they would be even more vulnerable. We cannot evacuate, Kara told them. And we cannot fight them in a direct confrontation. The collective attack force includes over 200 warriors from 3 different predator species. Against 50,000 untrained civilians and 5 of us, those are not odds we can overcome through conventional means. Then, what can we do? The colony's administrator asked. She was a middle-aged woman named Helena Chen who had clearly never faced anything like this before. But her voice was steady, and her eyes did not flinch from Kira's gaze. That was good. Kira could work with steady. We changed the terms of the engagement. Make them fight us on ground of our choosing, under conditions that favor us rather than them. Turn every advantage they have into a disadvantage. How? Kira smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. I am going to teach you what I learned on a colony ship when I was 14 years old. How to fight without rules. How to show no mercy. And how to make predators understand that humans are not prey. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Every able-bodied adult in the colony was given a crash course in guerrilla tactics. They learned how to set traps using agricultural equipment. They learned how to create choke points in the colony's corridors and streets. They learned how to communicate using signals that the collective's technology would not be able to intercept. Most importantly, they learned how to not be where the enemy expected them to be. Kira's team took positions at key points throughout the colony. Bracken would anchor the primary defensive line, his massive strength holding off direct assaults while the civilians fell back to secondary positions. Thessaly would coordinate intelligence, her camouflage allowing her to observe enemy movements without being detected. Thornwood would provide communications, his distributed body allowing him to relay information across the entire colony simultaneously. Refkin would handle assassination, phasing through walls to eliminate enemy commanders and sow chaos in their ranks. And Kira would do what she had always done. She would find ways to win that no one had ever thought of before. The collective arrived exactly on schedule. Their ships dropped out of hyperspace in a formation that broadcast their confidence. They expected easy prey. They expected screaming and running and the sweet taste of terror. They had done this dozens of times before, and it had always been the same. It was not going to be the same this time. The collective landing force touched down on the outskirts of the colony and began their assault. They moved with the coordinated brutality that had made them so effective against other targets. Wave after wave of warriors pressed forward, expecting civilian defenses to crumble. The defenses did not crumble. The first wave hit a minefield made from repurposed agricultural fertilizer. The explosions were not powerful enough to kill most of the armored warriors, but they were disorienting and painful. While the survivors regrouped, the second wave came under fire from hidden positions where colonists with improvised weapons poured projectiles into the confused mass. The collective adapted, as Kara had known they would. They split into smaller groups and began probing for weak points in the defense. This was exactly what she wanted. Every weak point was a trap. Small groups of predators would push through what appeared to be inadequate defenses, only to find themselves in kill zones where every angle was covered. Colonial farmers who had never held a weapon in their lives fought with the desperate courage of people protecting their homes and families. They did not try to stand against the collective in fair combat. They ambushed. They retreated. They struck and faded and struck again. The collective had never faced anything like this from a human colony. Hours passed. The attack stalled. The collective commander, a massive Vrang warlord named Skethric, began to realize that something was very wrong. They should have broken by now, he growled to his subordinates. Humans are weak. They surrender. They run. Why are they still fighting? One of his subordinates, a younger Vrang who had participated in several previous attacks, made a sound that might have been uncertainty. There are reports of a human among them. A female. Young. The warriors who have encountered her describe her as different from the others. She moves like a predator. She fights like a predator. Several of our best have tried to kill her. None have succeeded. One human female does not explain this resistance. No, warlord. But she seems to be leading them. Coordinating their defense. The tactics we are facing are unlike anything we have encountered before. They are not human tactics. Skethric considered this. He had risen to command through strength and cunning, but he was not stupid. He recognized when something had changed. Bring her to me, he ordered. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary. But bring her. The order went out, and the collective shifted their focus. Kira felt the change in the enemy's behavior almost immediately. They were no longer trying to break through the colonial defenses. They were hunting for something specific. For someone specific. They have identified you as the primary target, Thessaly reported through the communication network. Multiple units are converging on your last known position. Good. That means they are not focusing on the civilians. It also means they are going to kill you. They are going to try. Kira checked her weapons, such as they were. A salvaged energy pistol. A length of pipe she had sharpened to a point. The same piece of Vrang chitin she had carried since she was 14. Let them come. I have been waiting for this. She moved through the colony's maintenance tunnels, using the route she had memorized during the preparation phase. The collective warriors who had been sent to hunt her found empty rooms and abandoned positions. Every time they thought they had cornered her, she was somewhere else. Every time they closed in, another group of defenders hit them from behind. She was not running from them. She was leading them. Drawing them deeper into the colony, away from the landing zone, away from their ships, away from any hope of reinforcement. It took the collective almost 6 hours to realize what was happening. By then, it was too late. Rethkin and Thessaly had led a small team of volunteers to the collective's landing zone while the main force was distracted. They had sabotaged the ships, disabling their engines and weapons systems. The collective warriors were trapped on the planet, cut off from any possibility of retreat. And then, the real fight began. Kira emerged from the maintenance tunnels near the center of the colony, where the largest concentration of collective forces had gathered. They saw her immediately. A small human female, alone, facing hundreds of warriors from the most feared predator species in the galaxy. "My name is Kira Vance," she shouted loud enough for all of them to hear. "I am the human who killed 112 of your kind on a colony ship 3 years ago. I am the human who graduated from the Zenthari Combat Institute. I am the human who has spent every day since my parents died preparing for this moment." She pointed at the Vrang warlord who stood at the center of the enemy formation. "You came here expecting prey. You found something else. Now you have a choice. Surrender, and you will be treated as prisoners according to galactic law. Continue fighting, and I will show you what humans are truly capable of." Skethric laughed. It was a harsh, grating sound that made several of the colonists flinch. "You threaten us? One human against all of us? You are either very brave or very stupid. I am neither. I am simply telling you the truth." Kira raised her voice again. "You are not fighting 50,000 civilians. You are fighting 50,000 human beings who have decided that they will not die today. That is something you have never faced before. That is something you cannot defeat. Prove it." Kira smiled. "Gladly." She raised her hand, and the signal went out. Across the colony, every defensive position activated simultaneously. The traps that had been held in reserve were sprung. The colonists who had been waiting for this moment emerged from hiding and began their final assault. Bracken led a charge that broke through the collective's left flank. Thornwood coordinated a series of explosions that collapsed the buildings the enemy had been using as shelter. Rethkin appeared among the enemy commanders and began eliminating them one by one. And Kira herself waded into the center of the collective formation, heading directly for Skethric. The Vrang warlord was twice her size and had been fighting for longer than her entire species had known about space travel. He had killed thousands of beings from dozens of species. He was, by any objective measure, far more dangerous than she was. It did not matter. Kira had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. She knew exactly how Vrang fought. She knew their weaknesses, their patterns, their blind spots. She knew that Skethric, like all Vrang warlords, had grown overconfident from decades of easy victories. She knew that he would not take her seriously until it was too late. She was counting on it. Their fight lasted less than 4 minutes. Skethric attacked with overwhelming force, expecting to crush her with raw power. Kara dodged, deflected, and waited. She took hits that would have killed most humans, absorbing the damage and continuing to move. She watched for the opening she knew would come. It came when Skethric overextended on a killing blow, putting too much weight forward, leaving his left side exposed for just a fraction of a second. Kira drove her sharpened piece of Vrang chitin into the gap between his jaw and skull, exactly where she knew the venom glands were located. The same killing technique she had used on the Veth. The same knowledge she had gained from killing his kind on that colony ship. Skethric convulsed as his own venom flooded his bloodstream. He tried to speak, tried to understand what had happened, but his body was already failing. He collapsed, and Kira stood over him. "Your species made a mistake 3 years ago," she said quietly. "You thought killing my parents would break me. Instead, it made me into something you never expected. Something you never prepared for. Something that will keep coming for your kind until there are no more of you left to threaten my people." She looked up at the remaining collective forces. Without their warlord, without their ships, without any hope of victory, they had only 2 choices left. Most of them chose to surrender. The ones who did not were dealt with. The Battle of Haven's Rest, as it came to be called, was a turning point in galactic history. For the first time, a collective assault had been completely defeated. The news spread across human space and beyond. A single human woman, leading a team of 5 and 50,000 untrained civilians, had destroyed an attack force that should have overwhelmed them completely. Suddenly, the species that had been dismissed as weak and fragile were being seen in a new light. Kira became famous, though she had no desire for fame. She became a symbol, though she had only ever wanted to protect her people. Offers poured in from governments, military organizations, and private interests across the galaxy. She refused them all, just as she had refused the offers after her graduation. Her work was not finished. The Hunger Collective was weakened but not destroyed. Other predator species watched humanity with new respect, but also with new hatred. The galaxy was changing, and Kira knew that more battles lay ahead. She returned to her team and began planning their next mission. "The collective will not give up after one defeat," Thessaly observed during one of their planning sessions. "They will adapt. Learn from their mistakes. Come back stronger." "Yes. But so will we. There are billions of humans across thousands of worlds. You cannot protect them all." "No. But I can teach them to protect themselves. Show them what they are capable of. Make them understand that they do not have to accept the role that the galaxy has assigned them." Kira looked at her team, these 5 beings from 5 species who had become the closest thing she had to family. "That is what I learned at the Institute. That is what I learned on that colony ship when I was 14. The rules only bind you if you accept them. The odds only matter if you believe in them. And mercy is a luxury that the strong can offer to the weak." "And what are we?" Bracken asked. "Are we strong?" Kira smiled, and there was something fierce in that expression. Something that spoke of years of pain and loss transformed into purpose. "We are something better than strong. We are survivors. And we will keep surviving, keep fighting, keep refusing to accept defeat, until the galaxy learns that humans are not prey. That we never were. And when the galaxy finally learns that lesson?" Rethkin asked. "What then?" Kira looked out the viewport at the stars that spread across infinity, each one potentially harboring worlds and species that had never heard of humanity, that did not yet know what humans could do when they stopped playing by the rules. "Then, we teach them the rest of it. How to build instead of destroy. How to cooperate instead of conquer. How to become something better than the sum of our fears and hatreds." She paused. "The galaxy thinks it knows what humans are. They are wrong. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it." The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward whatever challenges awaited them. Kira Vance, the small, fragile human girl who had refused to die, was just getting started. Far across the galaxy, in the depths of space where no light reached, something ancient stirred. It had been watching the younger species for millennia, observing their petty conflicts and pointless wars. It had seen empires rise and fall. It had seen predator species consume entire civilizations. It had seen it all before, countless times, and found none of it worthy of its attention. But this was different. This human female. This tiny, insignificant being from a species that should have been prey. She had done something remarkable. Not through strength or power, but through sheer force of will. She had changed the rules of a game that had been played for millions of years. The ancient entity considered its options. It could crush this human and her entire species. It could wipe them from existence before they became a threat. That would be the prudent choice. The safe choice. But, where was the interest in safety? For the first time in ages, the entity felt something that might have been curiosity. What would this human become if allowed to grow? What would her species become if they followed her example? The questions were intriguing enough that the entity decided to wait. To watch. To see how this new piece moved across the great game board of galactic politics. Besides, it had waited for millions of years. It could wait a little longer. And, if the human and her kind proved worthy, perhaps they could finally provide what the entity had been seeking since before their son was born. A challenge. The story of Kira Vance was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. Back on the coalition ship, unaware of the ancient eyes watching from the darkness between stars, Kira settled into her command chair and began reviewing the briefing for their next mission. Another threat to neutralize. Another world to defend. Another opportunity to show the galaxy what humanity could do. She was tired. Her body still ached from the battle at Haven's Rest. The scars she carried, both visible and invisible, weighed on her more than she ever let her team see. But she was also proud. Proud of what she had accomplished. Proud of the team she had built. Proud of the path she had chosen. No rules. No mercy. Just the absolute determination to survive, no matter what. That was what humanity had to offer the galaxy. And, Kira intended to make sure the galaxy never forgot it. She keyed the communication system and spoke to her team. All hands, prepare for hyperspace jump. We have work to do. The stars blurred and stretched as the ship leaped into the endless dark. And, somewhere in that darkness, a girl who had refused to die continued to prove that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake when it decided that humans were weak. They were anything but.